Okay, so today we are reviewing this book from scratch by Tembi Locke. This is an adult memoir that I ended up giving 4 stars. I really liked this book, but there are some cons to it. Now, if you have not seen my reviews before, I split them into 2 sections. The first part is a non-spoiler section where I tell you 3 pros and 3 cons about the book in a non-spoilery way. Then in the second part we get into the full spoiler section where I can either gush or rant until my heart is content about the book in a spoilery way. So let's get on to the non-spoiler section right away by discussing 3 cons that I have about this book. My first spoiler-free con about this book is the little disclaimer that's written here at the top of the book from Reese Witherspoon. So you can see that there. And I'm now going to read it out to you. It says, "This book gives me all the feels. Tembi Locke learns to heal in the most beautiful way through the support of 3 generations of women. And yes, there is Italian food." And that is a quote from Reese Witherspoon. Now, I'm specifically commenting on the final part of her little comment here in the corner, which says, yes, there's Italian food. I think that this is partly my fault as well, but I also think that a lot of people could have interpreted this incorrectly as I did. With Reese claiming that there is Italian food in this book, and with my love of cooking, which I haven't cooked a lot recently because I have an oven that doesn't work, but I love cooking, I thought that this was going to be some sort of a culinary fiction. For those of you who don't know, culinary fiction is a fictional piece of work that includes cooking. So it might be about a chef or an aspiring chef or a home cook, and it gets very much into detail about cooking and the process of cooking and things like that. That is not this book at all. And so that is the first con for me. I went into this book thinking that there was at least going to be a quarter of the book, or if not just a smidgen less than that of cooking in this book, and no. While this book does revolve around a woman who meets a guy who is a chef. If I'm going to keep it in the spoiler-free way, this is known very early on in the book, so I don't consider it to be a spoiler. While she does meet a chef, and while the chef does tell her little tidbits along the way of, little pearls about cooking here and there, it's by no means a culinary fiction at all, and I found that to be a major con. I felt that Tembi Locke could, because this book being a memoir is about selected memories that Tembi Locke, the author, has of her own life that she put down on paper. I felt that she could have gone more into detail about cooking, her cooking experiences. My second con for this book is the writing style. It took me a little while to get used to Tembi Locke's writing style. This book is a dual perspective dealing with then and now. So a little earlier on this year, I read a book called My Dark Vanessa, which deals with the exact same sort of writing style with a then and now dual perspective. And one of the biggest differences between the way that the author of My Dark Vanessa went about writing the then and now book versus the way that Tembi Locke went about writing the then and now book is that the author of My Dark Vanessa made the then and now very obvious. With Tembi Locke, she didn't make it so obvious. I've had this experience a couple of times with reading already this year, where you feel like you're going through one straight timeline, and the next thing you know, the author has said something to make you realize that no, you're not in the timeline that you thought you were. But it's very, very subtle that if you're not fully focused on what you're reading, you're not going to pick this up. I didn't like that idea. So with My Dark Vanessa, the chapters would alternate between then and now. So every first chapter, every odd chapter, I should say, is now, and every even chapter was then. Where with From Scratch, that's not the case at all. it's throughout each chapter we have moments of then, now, then, now, then, now, and it's incredibly hard to pick up upon until you get used to Tembi Locke's writing style. My third con for this book is that I felt that the book could have gone a little deeper into certain things. I really appreciate that Tembi Locke wanted to write a memoir of her life, and while I really did like the book, I gave it 4 stars, I felt that she could have elaborated on certain things, and I just really didn't appreciate that there were things that she just glossed over that really would have been interesting to know a lot more about. In saying that, again, I gave the book 4 stars, and there's a reason for that. So let's get into my 3 spoiler-free pros for this book. My first pro for this book is that despite the fact that it's not a culinary fiction, this is an amazing book that is heavily shrouded in Italian as well as Sicilian culture, and I really appreciated that. It's one thing to read a memoir or an autobiography or a biography of someone's life where we get to learn about them. It's another when that book is very highly shrouded in another country's culture so that we get to learn more about that culture. This book is rich in Italian and Sicilian culture. In fact, something that I learnt with this book that I didn't know prior to going in is that they are 2 completely different cultures, and it wouldn't surprise me if I met someone that I thought was Italian if they were to correct me and say I'm not Italian, I am Sicilian, because they are very different despite the fact that they seem to be the same nation. And I learned that with this book, as well as many other different things to do with Italy and Sicilian culture. So the cultural aspects of this book were absolutely amazing, and I really did appreciate that. The second spoiler-free pro I have of this book is that we are dealing with a headstrong, powerful female protagonist. Tembi, what she has gone through in her life, the fact that she is not a mousy person by any means, and that she has a lot of confidence and she stands up for what is right, I very much have always appreciated with any female protagonist that I've read. Now, yes, I have appreciation for male protagonists that stand up for themselves as well, and that are very headstrong also, and, you know, very proud of who they are and know where they're going. But I especially appreciate this with female protagonists. Also, I appreciate it with female protagonists set in a culture that is generally speaking dominated by males. So the fact that Tembi was able to still be the person that she wanted to be and not allow anyone to place limitations on who she is, I really, really appreciated. My third pro for this book is that it is written in a way where, while, yes, I'm kind of going to contradict myself here with my spoiler-free con that I was referring to earlier, while there are certain parts that I wish she had elaborated on in the memoir, I also appreciate the amount of information we do get. These chapters are incredibly long, at least at the beginning. I believe the first chapter is a good at least 20 pages long, but I think it's actually much longer than that. I'll just confirm for you. Okay, so I was wrong by saying 20. It's actually 35 pages long, and I have not as yet dealt with any book where any chapter is 35 pages long. It's really long, but what I appreciate is it's long enough for you to grasp that particular memory. So if you don't know, a memoir, what sets a memoir apart from an autobiography or a biography is that a memoir is selective memories written from the perspective of the author that is writing about their own life. So each chapter in this book refers to a different selected memory that Tembi Locke has chosen to speak about to do with her life. Predominantly in Italy. There are some chapters that are set in Los Angeles, but predominantly in Italy and as well in Sicily. And I really, really, really appreciated that the chapters vary in length because they give enough for you to grasp, enough pages for you to be able to grasp what is going on. All in all, I thought it was great. Those cons that I mentioned earlier aside, I would have given this book 5 stars, but because those cons are there, I ended up giving it 4 stars, but I still appreciated it. So that's where I'm going to leave it for my spoiler-free section for this book from scratch. I'm going to now go into the spoiler section. So if you are leaving it there, if you haven't read this book and you don't want to be spoiled, I completely understand. I post videos every Thursday and Sunday with reviews and other videos in between, and I'll see you again very soon. But if you are sticking around for the review, the spoiler review, we will be right back in just a moment. Okay, into the spoiler section we go then. Warning, 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 spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. Here we go. This book revolves around Tembi Locke, and as I was mentioning in the spoiler-free section, it is a memoir of selective memories of her life that she wants to discuss. And it predominantly focuses on her relationship with a guy, I don't know if this is actually them. I think this is just two people that are taking a photo because this looks different to Tembi, but maybe it was taken in the past, who knows. But these two people on the cover are meant to be representing, in any case, Tembi, Locke, and Saro. So basically what happened is that Tembi, when she was younger, she went on a school exchange to Italy, and while she was there, she met a guy named Saro, who is a chef, and they end up falling in love, and it's really beautiful. Now, this is by no means a romance book at all. And if you've read it, you know that. And if you haven't read it and you're just wanting to know the spoiler section, the spoilers of this book, it's not a romance. Now, there is a particularly beautiful scene where Tembi is meant to be meeting up with Saro at one particular night after he's done with his work in the kitchen. As I said, he's a chef. And so she lives in an apartment complex or something like that, some kind of apartment building thing, where the rule is that no one's allowed to ring the bell after, like the doorbell, after midnight. It's just a rule for the sake of the tenants and also for the sake of the landlord, which is very much appreciated. So he's going to meet her downstairs outside of the apartment building for their date, and she comes home that day really exhausted and collapses onto her bed through exhaustion and falls asleep. She wakes up hours later and gets really concerned that she's fallen asleep, and poor Sado, he was probably waiting for her, but now he's gone home. And to make matters worse, it's even raining outside, and she just feels horrible that she's missed him. She goes to the window, and there he is in the rain, still there. I cried so much reading this. He's still there. And after reading this book, I was watching an interview that she was doing on some kind of a morning news show thing. And they were actually talking to her about that scene. And the lady was saying, was he really there? Like, after all that time in the rain? She goes, yeah, he was. I was looking out the window. It was raining. He was there. Oh my God. That is love. That is, that is love right there. As I said, this book is not a romance, but that was just beautiful. And the fact that it's not a work of fiction, this book is a non-fiction memoir. So the fact that this actually happened, it's like something out of a fairy tale. It's just so beautiful. Anyway, Sado ends up teaching Tembi a lot of different things. Being a chef and being born and raised in Italy, he has learned a lot of different things, and I really appreciate that he's trying to teach her little things about ingredients and how to highlight these ingredients. As I did say in the non-spoiler section, and I'm not going back on it because it is definitely not. This is not a culinary fiction, but I think the reason why Reese Witherspoon is saying, and yes, there is Italian food, is because Sado does talk to her about Italian food and gives her a bit of an appreciation. Whilst I was going into this book thinking that he would maybe, go into his kitchen that he works at one night with her and basically talk her through a recipe saying first we put in the basil and then we add some oil and we then let this sit for about 10 minutes because it does this, which would have been amazing if it was that. It was more that Sato just gave her little key points, such as like allowing her to appreciate fennel, for example, or when to place oil into a dish and how to really extract the most potent of flavoring and really celebrate the ingredients, which was really beautiful. So I did really enjoy that. So, owing to the love between them, Sato does come back with Tembi to LA. I did forget to mention that Tembi Locke is an actress, which I didn't know this, but I'd already seen her. One of the shows that she was in, this is not the show, she's certainly not most well known for this show, but one of the shows she was in is The Magicians, which is one of my favorite shows. She was in the first two episodes, and I totally forgot about that because the first two episodes of the whole show in season one. But yeah, she's an actress, so she currently lives in LA where she can, do a lot of auditions and a lot of things happen in LA. So Sato goes back with her and starts to learn a bit more about American culture. So Tembi was born and raised in Texas, while her family, I think she was either born and raised in Texas or she was born somewhere else but came over to Texas really early, one of the two. But Sato, who hasn't been out of Italy, is struggling a little bit to try and, work out how things go in LA compared to how things go in Italy. Eventually, however, the pair end up going back to Italy because they are going to be married, and they're going back to Italy to do the whole meet the parents thing, and Sato tells Tembi, I don't really think you're going to meet my parents because they are the way that they think, and I don't want to say that everyone in Italy is like this. I just think that the memoir is portraying that part of the culture of Italy could be like this, but certainly Sato's parents don't want to see their children marrying outside of their culture, and they have done that. Not only is Tembi American and not Italian, but she's also, I don't know how to say this, but you can see it from the cover. She's also darker skinned. I hope I can say that and people don't think I'm being offensive. I'm just trying to describe the color of her skin. She's darker skinned. And her parents, his parents, sorry, are going to have an issue with this because they only want their children to marry within their own culture. So they end up going to this hotel, and the plan is that they're just going to wait there and see if anyone shows up, and they'll go home after they've waited long enough. Slowly but surely, family members do start arriving. There is a family member that has moved over to Switzerland who isn't really part of the whole Italian culture anymore. They come over right away, which I can appreciate because Switzerland is known for being a neutral country. So I can appreciate that they came over right away. It took a long time, and eventually, at the point where it felt like Tembi and Sato were about to give up, Nonna, who is what Tembi calls Sato's mum, shows up with Sato's dad, and eventually we find out that she told Sato's dad, Nonna told Sato's dad that she is going to show up no matter what, whether he decides to come or not. Because also another thing that we learn with the culture, at least from what Tembi has seen, I don't want to just stereotype Italy or Sicily. I want to keep it to, this is Tembi Locke's memoir, and what she saw is that the culture is that it is very much male centric. So the men in the family decide what happens and the women go along with it. But so Nonna making this big move to say, I don't care what you do to Sato's dad. If you stay home or if you come with me, I'm going to see them. I really did appreciate that. So we then end up going back home, and unfortunately Sato ends up getting an incurable disease. I won't go too much into it, and he does unfortunately die. This is a really tough moment to read, especially because there is a scene with Tembi Locke on the phone with an American therapist, and they're talking about so Tembi and Saro have adopted a little girl, Zuela, which Zuela in English translates to of the earth, which I think is really such a beautiful name and a beautiful thing to name your child, of the earth. Oh, it's gorgeous. Anyway, Zuela is quite young when Saro dies, and Tembi's on the phone with the therapist, and the therapist says to her, "You need to take a picture of him. Once he dies, you need to take, or before he dies, something like that, you need to take a picture of him, because what's going to happen is there's going to come a time where Zuela is going to take things out on you with the death of Saro, and so having that picture is going to assist you." The therapist also says, allow Zuela to be with him as much as she possibly can, and many other different things. This was really hard to read, but I really appreciate that the therapist was thinking 10 steps ahead. So that was good. But after Saro's passing, eventually Tembi is forced to go back to Italy to stay with Nonna, because Saro had stipulated that he wanted to be cremated, and he wanted his cremations, to at least part of them, to be sprinkled in Italy. So she went there, and we get to experience the cultural difference between Italy and America, or at least Western culture, so English speaking Western culture, because we're the same in Australia, in that when it comes to a funeral, we here in Australia are exactly the same. We celebrate the life that was lived, where in Italy, they mourn the passing of the life that was lost. So it's a very big difference. Again, it's very heavily shrouded in Italian and Sicilian culture, and I so appreciated that so much. She goes over to Italy, and slowly but surely she starts forming a bond with Nonna, and she subsequently goes back many times to see Nonna. Their friendship grows throughout the book, which I found to be really beautiful, because at the beginning, Nonna really didn't want to know Tembi, and she doesn't speak a word of English, so Tembi had to learn Italian to bridge that gap at least, but still, it was really tough for them to have any type of bond, and then slowly but surely they start connecting. Then there came this really beautiful moment where Nonna invites Tembi into her room and shows her, I'm going to try hard not to cry, she shows her these hospital clothes that she has in her drawers, because at least according to the memoir, in Italy, when you go to hospital, they don't, unlike here, or I assume in the States as well, they don't have hospital gowns, so you have to pack all your own clothes, and so that, when you go to hospital, you need to have your own gowns and such. So Nonna is showing Tembi this, and then Nonna even goes as far to show Tembi her death clothes that she has specifically bought to be buried in. Now, Nonna's not dying. There's no way that there's even a hint that Nonna is dying. She just wants to have all this stuff prepared, and she wants to show Tembi. This is a massive moment of those two bridging the gap. One day further on down the track, Nonna tells Tembi that she is going to be signing the house over to Tembi, because in the interim, Nonna's husband, Saro's father, has also passed away, so it's basically just Nonna, Tembi, and Zuela now, and Tembi and Zuela travel each summer, I think it is, every year, back to Italy. So Nonna says she's going to give the house to Tembi. She wants to put it in her name so that when she dies, it can be Tembi's house. This is a really beautiful moment. There are some struggles, because there is a guy who's trying to claim that he should have the rights to the house, which I didn't really appreciate this. I get that it's a real memory, but so I guess I feel bad for Tembi that it wasn't a cleanly executed thing. But that was just really beautiful, and showed once and for all that her and Nonna had really bridged that gap and become really close, and so that was really beautiful. I really appreciated this book. There's a lot more that I can say, but I don't think there's a need to. I really just appreciated so much about this book, but the thing I appreciated the most was just how rich in Italian and Sicilian culture that this book is. I just thought it was absolutely amazing. And yeah, I just thought it was absolutely wonderful. So I grew to love the bond and the connection between Tembi and Nonna. And sadly, very sadly, the day that I finished reading this book, I did some research on Tembi Locke, watched some interviews, even went to her website, and I found out that in January of this year, so not that long ago when you consider everything, in January of this year, sadly, Nonna passed away, and oh my gosh, it's just so sad. So I don't know if you've read this book or not, but if you have read this book, and I don't, if you have read this book, I don't know if you knew that, but that was very disheartening to find out because when Nonna shows Tembi her death clothes, I thought that this was some kind of a clue to the fact that Nonna was going to pass away before the end of the book. But that never happened. Nonna was still alive at the end of the book. And I was talking to my mum about this because if you don't know, this is a book that I was given to read as part of the book club that I have with my mum. My mum loves this book and I wanted her to read a book that I love. So we were talking about this book as I was reading it. And I said to her, if this was a fictional book, the reason why Nonna would have shown Tembi the death clothes would have been because Nonna was going to die by the end of the book, and so we would be prepared because that's a clue that Nonna's going to die, and Tembi will be prepared because she knows what Nonna wants to be dressed in. But it was just a moment of bonding. Nonna doesn't die by the end of the book, but she is now dead, and that's really sad. Tembi wrote a beautiful thing on her website, so I definitely recommend you check that out if you want to know more about her, but also more about what happened with Nonna. Her website is tembilock.com, so, the author's name.com. Yeah, so apparently she died with lots of loving family around her, and Tembi and Zuela were talking to her that morning and telling her how much they loved her on the morning that she passed away, so at least they got to have that moment. But I just think that's incredibly sad because I grew to love Nonna in this book, Nonna and Tembi, and Zuela as well, but I think mostly for me, I fell in love with the relationship between Nonna and Tembi, and to have that in a book where you have a relationship, and it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship, but just a relationship in general, especially of this, born out of really out of a situation. It's a situational relationship that they have. If not for the relationship of the romantic relationship of Saro and Tembi, Tembi never would have met Nonna in the first place. So to fall in love with this relationship myself, but then to have it be a real story so we can actually follow what's going on, even after the book was written, was one thing, but then to find out that Nonna had died was just, it was heartbreaking for me. But anyway, back to the book itself, I did love it. As I said at the beginning, there are cons to this book. Yes, there are. But that being said, I still felt that it was a good read, and I want to give a big shout out to my mum. Hi, mum. And I want to say a big thank you to her because if not for our book club, I would not have picked up this book. Memoirs aren't usually my cup of tea, but I picked this up and I loved it. And you guys, my mum and I have such a great relationship that if I didn't like this book, I feel that I would be safe enough to say to her, Mum, I'm sorry, but I just didn't like this book and I'm giving it 1 star. But I did. I loved this book. It took me a couple of pages to get used to Tembi Locke's writing style, maybe 1 or 2. But from there on, it was just such a great journey and I really appreciated everything about this. The journey that Tembi Locke goes through, the rich Italian and Sicilian culture, as well as the great relationship arc that Tembi Locke and Nonna go through. It's just so beautiful. So 4 stars. I highly recommend it to anyone who loves cultural reads, who loves to read a book and really feel like you are experiencing or living the culture of another nation. And it was just really beautiful. So Tembi Locke is apparently working on a book currently, and that book will be another memoir, but it's revolving around her life being born and raised in Texas. I think either born or being raised, one of the two. I don't want to get that wrong, in Texas. And I did say this on Goodreads. Sign me up. Like, I love this book so much that I would love to read her next one whenever it does come out, because, yeah, I really appreciate the cultural side of it. And if Tembi is going to be including the cultural side of Texas in this next memoir that she's writing, then I definitely want to read it. But that is where I am going to leave it. I try not to have these reviews go for half an hour, and yet it's happened again. So I'm going to leave that there and let you guys go. Peace, blessings, and so much love. I highly recommend you read this book because it is really, really good. Yeah, so there you go. So thank you so very much for watching. I'm going to let you guys go. Peace, blessings, and so much love. I post videos every Thursday and Sunday with reviews and other videos in between, and I'll see you again very, very soon. Thank you again, and happy reading. Bye, guys. Bye.